Are we working? Are we going? Hi, everyone. This is something a little bit new. I just got back from New York Comic Con. You can guess who I went as. Most of you are seeing my face for the first time. Hi. But my face, as handsome and boyishly good-looking as it is not important right now. What's important is that I just watched the Series 11 premiere of Doctor Who, The Woman Who Fell to Earth. It's the premiere of Jodie Whittaker. It's the premiere of Chris Chibnall as showrunner and head writer for the show. Couple of new rules. This is how we're gonna be doing things. Just me, maybe occasionally a guest or two, sitting down, talking really fresh, right off the bat, thoughts about the week's Doctor Who episode. I've been wanting an excuse to talk about this show more on this channel for a long time. Doing scripted episodes about it has proved difficult, especially with scheduling and all of the other things that I kind of want to get to. But now that we are back to getting new weekly episodes, I can do what I feel like is more convenient for me and more natural, which is just off-the-cuff discussions of my general thoughts before I move on to a sort of more in-depth discussion between me and my friends, which will be on my friend's channel, Red Lightning. I will link that channel in the description, but, that's there. So I'm gonna hop right into my thoughts on the episode as quickly as possible. I just saw it. This is coming less than an hour having finished the episode, so this is all very fresh. So, The Woman Who Fell to Earth. I'm hearing mostly positive reactions to this episode. A couple of friends of mine are sort of lukewarm on it. I'm definitely in the more positive camp. I thought this is a very good episode, a very strong showcase for Whittaker, a very strong showcase for Chibnall as a writer. And keep in mind, for those of you who have not been with this channel since the beginning, I'm coming into this series with a very strong pro-Chris Chibnall bias. I have a playlist of episodes that I did scripted reviews for, which I'm also going to link in the description, all Chibnall episodes. And Chibnall has yet to write an episode for mainline Doctor Who, which I dislike. I know that he's gotten a lot of guff from Doctor Who fans for not just his Doctor Who work, but also his Torchwood stuff, like Cyberwoman, and I've actually just recently talked about Cyberwoman this week, again on the Red Lightning channel. I agree that that episode is garbage, it is ridiculous, but I don't hold it against Chibnall as a writer. I think there were a lot of outside factors that he could not account for that made that episode bad. I think he's a very creative guy. I think his episodes of Doctor Who, even if they're not as a total package the best, they tend to capture what I like about this show the most, and he gets the Doctor as a character, especially in a way that I think a lot of other writers maybe don't. So, I think The Woman Who Fell to Earth is a great example of that. And just really general thoughts, as far as premiere episodes go, as far as the first episode for a Doctor, I think this is up there. I don't know if I'd call it as good as The 11th Hour. I still hold The 11th Hour very, very highly. I think I'm on the fence right now. If it or The 11th Hour is better, I'm leaning towards The 11th Hour. With that said, I think The Woman Who Fell to Earth is better than Rose, better than The Christmas Invasion, and better than Deep Breath. And Deep Breath had its moments, which I think are comparable to this episode, especially at the end. But for the most part, as a whole episode of TV, this outclasses 9, 10, and 12th Doctor's premiere episodes pretty easily. It's not even a competition. Talking about Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor, moment of truth time, all the backlash that she's faced, which I took it upon myself to make a video about. How does she fare in her first episode? I think she leaves a really good impression. I think she leaves a stronger impression than Tennant did, in The Christmas Invasion. I think she leaves a stronger impression than Capaldi did in Deep Breath. I don't want to make this whole thing all about comparing it to previous Doctor's first episodes, but just, that's a good gauge, I think, for how this episode fares. I don't know if she immediately, leaves as great of an impression as Matt Smith did in 11th Hour and Christopher Eccleston did in Rose. Those are two performances that I feel those guys knew who their doctors were, point blank, down to the smallest decimal, right off the bat. I don't know for sure if that's what we have here. I'll have to compare her performance here to later in the season to be certain of that. But she has a really solid grasp on this character already, I think. I don't know, I thought it was going to take me a while to get used to her accent. I got used to it really fast. This is between her and this is between Chibnall's writing. Chibnall, more than any of the other, recurring writers, I think, really captures the Doctor as an adventurer and really captures the Doctor as a scientist. And everyone tends to capture the Doctor's empathy pretty well, with some exceptions. But there are a lot of moments that I think nicely, smartly prioritize all three of those different traits. Especially the empathy and the science angle. Because some episodes and some show writers, I think, underplay just how much of a technical genius the Doctor is supposed to be. And Chibnall, I think, is someone who always manages to find a way to work that in that it's not just we give the Doctor a token technobabble speech every episode like some writers can, I think, fall into the trap of doing. Chibnall always seems to dedicate time to the Doctor working with machinery and figuring things out and piecing things together scientifically and working as an engineer. And this episode does that on multiple occasions, one of them being the creation of the sonic screwdriver. I was, I think, in the majority camp of really not liking the new sonic screwdriver design. I've actually been turned around on it by this episode because of the story context. I want to say all of the Doctor's previous screwdrivers, starting with Eccleston, had their screwdrivers created by the TARDIS. They were sort of like a thing that the TARDIS whipped up and ejected. Here, this is something that the Doctor comes up with on the fly and creates by herself with just Earth technology. I don't know, I really like that Chibnall does this, and I feel like this is something that he does that not many other writers do, that never gets talked about, which is that he doesn't just tell us that the Doctor is a smart person. He gives the Doctor multiple instances of being alright, let's get my hands dirty, let's work with some tech, let's build things. And the idea that the Doctor just whipped up a new sonic screwdriver with some Earth tech that she just found lying around in less than an hour is really neat to me and really justifies that design, I think, as being, sort of bulky and nothing like the other screwdrivers design-wise. As far as the things that stuck out to me about this episode, the cinematography I really enjoyed. I think Doctor Who is a very... it's a show that's shot like TV most of the time. It's understandable. It is a TV show. But I really enjoy the episodes that can get a bit more filmic in the way that they're shot. Heaven Sent is my go-to example. Very rarely do we get a Doctor Who episode that is shot and directed as well as Heaven Sent is, and that's something that elevates that episode to one of the best of the show of all time, I think. The direction and cinematography in this episode isn't that good, but it does stand out a bit more than Doctor Who tends to. There are some shots here that I think are really strong dynamic shots, especially toward the beginning and toward the end of the episode. Focusing mainly on the writing and the characters and this stuff. I'm not going to go into too much plot detail. I will leave that for the more lengthy, heavier discussion that will be on the other channel. I think it's hilarious that this episode opens with a vlog as a framing device. Not just because I am in a vlog, but also because another Doctor Who episode that I just got talking about on the other channel is Love and Monsters, which uses someone, the main character of that episode, vlogging as a framing device. And I had an interesting experience with that episode, rewatching it for the first time in years. But that's the subject of another video, which you can watch here. Or here. I don't know which direction thing is actually going to be in, so, you know, whichever hand. They're done by one of our new companions, Ryan, and it is interesting, the way that we start the episode after the whole vlog thing is that we open with Ryan trying and failing to ride a bike for the first time, and as we find out very organically, I think, through dialogue later, he has a disability that affects his coordination, and sadly it doesn't play much into this episode outside of the bookends with him attempting to ride a bike and failing and then going back to it, and we're very likely to factor that into later episodes. I don't think that's an arbitrary choice. It's just an interesting character detail. It's an interesting... The other companions, we have Graham and we have Yasmin Khan, and the whole dynamic between the three of them is interesting. Going into this episode, I was curious as to what the relationship between the three of them would be prior to meeting the Doctor, getting in the TARDIS, if there was going to be a relationship between the three of them. Turns out there is a relationship that the three of them have prior to the Doctor meeting. Ryan and Yaz are friends from school. They're sort of meeting each other for the first time in a while, having graduated together. And Graham is actually Ryan's granddad, newly married to his grandma, Grace. And so those four characters have a really neat dynamic, and once the Doctor enters the episode, the five of them have a really cool group chemistry, I think. I found all of them fairly likable. This episode is actually really good with just sort of characterization, because there's a lot of characters to hit. We have the four characters, Ryan, Graham, Yaz, and the Doctor, who are going to be throughout the season. We have Grace, who is a main character of this episode. We have the villain of this episode. We have two other characters in this episode who... One, I don't know for sure if we get a name, but I'll touch on him briefly. A guy who has sort of been waiting on the villain of the episode, tracking him because of something that happened to his sister years ago. And we use him really effectively. The purpose that he kind of serves is to get across a lot of plot details. We very subtly and organically introduce details about the villain of this episode through this other random guy's involvement. He is essentially a plot device, but at the same time, the actor portraying him and the way that we choose to portray him, especially once we get sort of a video segment with him, is really compelling. The guy's performance really sells me on this as a real person and not just a plot device. This is a character who dies with hardly a couple of minutes of screen time, and I really feel for him, especially posthumously. I really have to check later to see if there is a name for that character, but people who've seen the episode know who I'm talking about. His performance was really good. I enjoy that character. There's another character named Carl, who is, again, kind of a plot device. He is basically the MacGuffin that the villain is after. And, I don't know, Chibnall's just really good with getting across characters who feel like they live and breathe outside the episode. You know, that's something that he's really good at doing with one-off characters. Because this guy, Carl, he has a sort of self-esteem issue. He likes to listen to these tapes where it's like, you know, self-help motivation type stuff, where he will tell himself, I am important, I am valued, there's someone out there who wants me. And what I like to think is a subtle little joke in the episode is that we hear him say that, and because the villain of the episode, the idea is that he's hunting him, basically. He says it again, he says the I am valued, I am important. but before he can say, somebody wants me, the villain of the episode is coming up. He's coming up the crane that Carl works at. He never gets to finish that third part of the mantra, and I think it's left up to the audience to piece together, yeah, there is someone out there who wants you. He's about to come up here and kill you. I thought that was a nice, funny, little subtle joke. And I keep mentioning the villain of the episode. I might as well talk about him too. Zim Shah, or as the Doctor and I will continuously call him, Tim Shaw, he's basically the Predator. This episode is Predator. And is probably a better Predator movie, this episode, than The Predator, which just came out. The way that this is set up is that he's supposed to hunt down a designated human with no weapons, no assistance. And once he does that, he can return back to his home planet victorious, you know, that kind of thing. But he is, as the Doctor points out throughout the episode, clearly not really the best guy for the job, and so he cheats. He's here to hunt one person, and yet he keeps creating collateral damage, and the Doctor really has to stop him because of this character flaw that he has, where he is really insecure and he has to cheat because he doesn't think that he can really do the job without help. And that really is what drags the Doctor and the rest of the cast into the episode and creates all of this guy's problems for him. So, here we have an antagonist who, if he was actually good enough to do what he was sent here to do, he would have no problems. But he isn't, and so he sets himself up, he sets his own demise. And another aspect of that character that I think is really smart is just how little details that make him feel genuinely inhuman and alien. Like, this is a guy who yanks out people's teeth after he kills him and shoves them into his face. Like, that is something that is ridiculously dark. He doesn't have weapons, so the way that he goes about killing people is just that his species are naturally incredibly cold, like sub-zero temperatures, so a human being will die the second he places his hand on them. And that, I think, is just a creative, like Chris Chibnall didn't have to take the extra step to think of, like, a creative, non-weaponized way to have this guy go about murdering people. And he didn't have to think of, like, such a unique, creepy way of having him sort of commemorate his trophies and his kills. But he went the extra mile and did that. He's not, like, one of the greatest villains that Doctor Who has ever had, but as far as, like, first episode premiere villains, I think he's the best we've had so far. Again, comparing it to Deep Breath, 11th Hour, Rose, Christmas Invasion, I think he's better than any of the villains that we got in those episodes. Which is saying a lot because I think he might have the least screen time. I don't know, I can't say that with confidence. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. But this episode, its greatest strength, I think, is that it takes time to breathe. And unlike a lot of other Doctor's premiere episodes, takes a moment to really give everyone a sense of this is a very grounded human conflict. Like, yeah, duh, we're dealing with aliens, but we'll take a second to have everyone sort of connect and have the Doctor really forge these relationships. We make a point in the trailers and in this episode where the Doctor's like, will you be my new best friends? Can we be friends now? And I do think this, more than a lot of other Doctor-companion relationships right from the very beginning, is more close friends than it is assistants. Because they're all almost equals, the Doctor's clearly calling the shots and leading the pack, but they're all, like, connected. I like the pacing of this episode. I don't feel like there's much in the way of wasted moments. And this is all a lot of me gushing. And I do want you guys to go over to the Red Lightning channel and listen to that discussion video when it comes up. I'm not going to talk about the big spoiler that happens at the end, which is really my biggest problem with the episode. Final thoughts. The more that I talk about it, the more I'm kind of bringing myself around on even little aspects of this episode that I didn't care for. And outside of the one big thing that I'm going to talk about in the other video, I don't really think I had much in the way of negatives with this episode. I think this was a really strong first foot forward for Whittaker, for the rest of the cast, for Chibnall. If this is what we're getting with Series 7, then I think we're in good hands. I think we're finally going to get the show that I've been hoping for this show to be for a couple of years now, and that's a plane. Yeah, I really think this is a good episode. Comment down below, let me know what you think about this episode. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Yeah, it's good.